Hello.
Our story begins inside of a warehouse in the lower levels of the Coruscant city. Fives was hashing out his information on the plot behind the Grand Army of the Republic. He knew that the Chancellor was in on the joke. There was something he was hiding, and the ARC Trooper knew it. Anakin was in disbelief, and Rex was confused and concerned. These accusations could be galaxy-defining and war-changing. If Fives was indeed right about these beliefs, then they needed to act. But Rex was thrown off his train of thought because Anakin pointed his finger forward, telling Fives that the Chancellor wasn't capable of what he said he was. Fives started to get frustrated. He was drugged and confused. He knew what he saw and he didn't know what Nala Se did to him. He wasn't fully out of his mind and he knew that much, but he didn't know how to convey those feelings to Rex and Anakin. All he knew was to react off of his emotions. As he continued telling them about this plot and massive deception, there was a shuffling. Fives heard it, but Rex and Anakin didn't. Commander Fox and his Coruscant Guard pulled into the room from the back side, pointing their blasters at the ARC Trooper as he panicked, believing that Anakin and Rex had betrayed him. He raised his blaster and fired a shot. It echoed out throughout the warehouse, and the other Coruscant Guardsmen fired at their brother. Fives rolled out of the way, moving on instinct and ARC Trooper training. He ducked behind a crate as blaster bolts plastered the other side of it. Fives didn't even realize he hadn't set his weapon for stun. He would never in good conscience be able to kill one of his own brothers. He changed the setting quickly and fired over the crate. It was too late for him. He already proved that he was willing to kill one of his own. Fives ducked out of the way again as another two clones dropped to the ground unconscious. Fives used a crate and ran it to the far side and used it to shuffle behind some shelves. He chose this location because he knew the exit points. The Coruscant Guard moved out, as the medic pulled Fox's helmet off and asked him if he was alright. Fox wheezed as he said something, feeling like the nightmares were over. What no one realized about their clone commander was that Fox was controlled by Palpatine, unlike the rest of the clones. He was forced into this position by both his role and his Chancellor. He died telling the medic that the nightmares were over. The medic looked over to Skywalker and Rex, who demanded that they be released. Once the ray shield was shot, Anakin pulled his lightsaber into his hands and ignited it, running towards the exit. Rex was close behind as he tried to tell Anakin that they needed to save Fives from whatever this was. Anakin wasn't willing to listen though. This had gone far enough and he was fully reacting on emotional instinct. Fives ran into the streets and hopped onto a speeder and shot off. As he did, more blaster fire followed after him, but he wasn't clipped or hurt. Anakin stopped behind the clones and snarled, looking to the closest highest ranked Fox and telling them to go out and find that traitor. He needed to be brought in, dead or alive. Rex stopped Anakin, trying to get into his head again, but it wasn't working. As the Coruscant Guardsmen moved out to relay their new orders, Rex stopped Anakin. This wasn't himself. He understood that the Chancellor and he were close, but that didn't devalue Fives' life. Fives may have acted erratically, but there was something far greater going on here. Tup wouldn't just kill a Jedi Master, and Fives wouldn't just kill one of his brothers. If they got him killed, it could jeopardize whatever information he believed he found. Anakin gritted his teeth and sighed, telling Rex reluctantly to send Appo and Vong down to the lower levels and give them specific orders to find Fives and keep him safe. But if they found him, Anakin couldn't promise that they could get Fives to the Jedi Temple. It might be a better fate if he died on sight instead. Rex didn't care. This was his brother. He needed to be saved. As captain, it was his duty to protect his troopers. Fives, on the other hand, was furious. He didn't understand why that just happened. He felt like he was being betrayed, and now his general and captain were working against him. He couldn't go back to the Republic now. Surely his wanted posters would be filling up the streets of the Coruscant city. Fives landed a speeder down in an alleyway and found himself a place to get some rest. His head was pounding, and he couldn't keep up this on-the-run charade. The worst part is, despite him obviously looking and sounding like a clone, he wouldn't be able to hide himself in plain sight because of his tattoo. Fives settled down into a small motel-like residence. He didn't really have to check in. He just presented credits under a small hatch and he was given the keys. These were commonplace down here in the lower levels of Coruscant. If you could afford it, you could have it. When Fives entered, it was horrid. The smell was that of death sticks and worse. The walls were torn apart. There were messages carved into everything, and the bed, while made and clean, wasn't any better than the cots he had inside of his clone barracks. He took a deep breath and mellowed out, slowly getting himself some rest inside of this new residence that he acquired for himself. Fives understood that when he woke up, he would need to go lower into the city. These clones were ruthless, and while he wasn't aware that the 501st was given orders specifically to capture him, he knew they'd be coming. His assumption was that he was completely on his own, a clone that would be labeled as clinically insane and not to be trusted. One clone against the entire Republic, and a generational plan that started over a millennium ago. When he woke up, he left the residence and his speeder was gone. Lovely. Fives grabbed a cloak off the ground and wrapped it over his shoulders to cover his clone armor. As the day went on, he continued to remove pieces of his armor and replace them with decent pieces of clothing. Really anything he could find. What he didn't know was that he was being trailed. There was someone more than a clone army following him. The clones were closing in on his position, but he also didn't know that. As the day started to get closer to evening again, Fives found another place to put his head down. He paid for the room as he walked over towards it. The door opened up and he was dragged in with a hand over his mouth. He backpedaled and tried to fight back. Due to the drugs finally wearing off, he was able to figure out where he was, what was happening, put two and two together, and get himself around defending for himself. Again. He reached for his pistol, but it was kicked out of his hands as the knife was pulled around to his throat. It was so precise because the tip of the blade touched the edge of his skin, and an icy voice crawled down his neck, telling him to stop or he would die. Fives loosened the grip of his hands on the individual's forearm. The arm didn't move as it slowly released its tension on holding a cup over his mouth. The blade next to his neck was pulled away. The voice told him that there was a very high bounty for his head. However, she wouldn't be able to collect said bounty without some assistance. She turned him around after releasing him and shoved him. As he gained his balance and raised his hands, he saw her and immediately recognized Ventress's face. He looked for his pistol as he prepared to reach for it, and she raised her hand and lifted him off the ground. She called him a little clone and told him to stop trying to get himself killed. They had a chance to form an alliance. Fives tried to speak, so she released her grip, and he told her that she could collect a bounty on him if she wanted, but he needed her to listen. She crossed her arms as he rubbed his neck with his hand, being that it was the first time he was ever force-choked. He didn't understand how it worked, but he didn't want to feel that again. He told her that the information he had could redefine the galaxy. Asajj asked what he meant, and he told her everything. Without the drugs in his system, he told her every piece of detail in perfect articulation. There wasn't a hint of madness, and there was sincerity in his voice and truth in his eyes. He told her everything that he understood about Palpatine and what he was capable of. She stopped and pulled up a chair. There were so many thoughts and memories running through her mind. Fives studied her moves. During his ARC Trooper training, he was taught how to interrogate. Not that he would need to do that frequently, but if the chance ever presented itself, he knew how to read people. Asajj was almost impossible to figure out. She rubbed her chin and told Fives that the information he had was brilliant. The fact that Sidious was secretly Palpatine made perfect sense. He didn't understand who was Sidious. She explained that when she was a separatist, she was an assassin. Her job as an assassin was to do whatever Dooku didn't want to do. However, Lord Tyrannus was not the Sith Lord. There was someone larger than him, someone with control over everything in the galaxy. At the time, it didn't make sense. She didn't believe Dooku, and she didn't think Sidious was who Dooku said he was. But as the years went by, the Sith continued to do things that made her doubt her initial reaction. After she was betrayed, she kind of forgot about it. But the fact that Palpatine could very well be Sidious made sense. Dooku often spoke about the work behind the scenes, the stuff that she wouldn't learn until they betrayed Sidious and transferred the rule of two into something greater. What was that? She didn't know. But she did know that, at least in accordance to what Fives was saying, it made perfect sense for the Dark Lord to be Palpatine. She asked Fives what else he understood, and he kind of reiterated some of the same talking points he tried to convey to Anakin and Rex. But the real tragic irony for Fives was that Asajj Ventress, the woman who had served the CIS, the one who had mercilessly killed his brothers, the individual who served with the Sith, took his fears seriously. This, of course, was in comparison to the man he was supposed to trust, the man he put all of his faith into when serving under him and working for him. What a terrible twist. Fives did feel betrayal. Now that he was in control over his emotions, he expressed that. He thanked Ventress for at least hearing him out, telling her about the entire event with Anakin and Rex. She snarled, telling Fives that he was lucky to make it out of that situation alive. She didn't care for Skywalker or the clones, but she was surprised the always compassionate Jedi were the last ones to listen. However, Asajj made a point to Fives. She told him that she hated the Jedi and the Republic, but she also hated the Sith, so she wanted him to tell her what she could gain from helping him. If she turned him over to the Jedi, he could be killed. Similar with the Republic, they could also do the same to her. If they saw Fives and her working together, they would do the same thing they did with Ahsoka. The flaws of the Order and the system of government they swore loyalty to would be their own downfall again. Fives told her that he didn't know. He was afraid, truthfully. None of his training prepared him for this. She understood these emotions and realized that perhaps this clone specimen and herself weren't so different, becoming outcasts and sworn away by their leaders. When she said this, Fives nodded his head with a bit of sadness. Unlike Ahsoka, Fives could see that there was a true similarity between the two of them, and despite his disheartened demeanor, it had nothing to do with Asajj. Did he want to relate to someone he didn't want to be allies with? Not really, but his sadness and frustrations had nothing to do with her. She was an ally now. He could never repay her enough for at least hearing him out instead of just trying to get her credits and bounce. Fives' problems were with the Jedi and the Republic. He remembered reading about a report from Christophsis, long before joining the 501st. Clone Trooper Slick spoke about the enslavement of the clone army, the enslavement that sent his brothers to death on the front lines. Now Fives had faced that same reality, the fact that his brothers were being sacrificed for a war that made no sense. Their creation was hard enough to fathom, let alone the constant dying, the war with no political recourse, and the desolation of society around them. People hated the war, the clones, the droids, the CIS, the Republic, and the Jedi, but now he only realized that his brothers and himself were created for the sole purpose of destroying the Jedi and giving one person power. It was heartbreaking. There were brothers of his dying across the galaxy at this very moment, and they were losing their lives for nothing. It was just a war for power, one that none of these clones would ever see or feel the reward of. Ventress wasn't good with the whole comforting thing, so she changed the topic, switching on the age-old hologram device behind her. There were a couple stations that played on it, and the first one was the news. After it came on, she wished she never tried to change the topic. While Fives was down in the lower levels, a journalist released the information around the Fives case. The people on Coruscant were already on edge. The war had gone on long enough, and a couple months before the Jedi Temple was bombed by one of their own. During that same temple bombing, there were protesters trying to end the war by showing off no clone signs. The clones were viewed similarly to the Jedi, and then news of a clone killing another clone became widespread, and it put fear into the minds of the public. The clone army wasn't like an army of enlisted soldiers. This was an army created on one planet by scientists no one knew and ordered by the Jedi for some reason 10 years before a war started. The entire thing felt eerie as it was, and now the clones were dying to other clones? What was happening? The event was being framed by an anti-clone journalist, so it made the entire situation seem worse, like there was a struggle about their ideals and what it meant to serve the Republic. The media took the story and ran with it, and because it got clicks, it got more attention. It spread like wildfire, and very quickly the Republic was forced into more protests. People went to the Jedi Temple, Executive Building, and Senate Building to protest the continuation of the war, and even more than that, the usage of the clone army. The tragedy of this reaction was it was just that, a reaction. The public had a gut instinct to see this story the way it was shown to them. They no longer trusted the Jedi, and that was irritating. Because how is one supposed to live with themselves when they're supposed to trust untrustworthy individuals in a corrupt order to protect them? That alone creates a burden of frustration, especially when a former Jedi was leading the war effort from the other side of the battle map. On top of the distrust for the Jedi was now the distrust for the clone army, an army bred by the Jedi for a war that was now turning in on itself. This looked bad on the Republic and the Jedi specifically, and the public made calls to disband the clone army, some even going as far as to say they should be executed. The reason for the calls for the execution of clones was because if the clones could kill their own brothers, then what was to say stop them from killing every citizen within the Republic in unprovoked attacks? While the public was having a mental breakdown over the whole Fives killing Fox incident, the two new allies were moving through the lower levels. Asajj was truthfully going to try something unexpected. Due to her experience with the Ahsoka incident, she believed it'd be better to move out lower and stay hidden more. They could keep an eye out for the unfolding events around the galaxy, as they let everything blow past them. They were hoping that it would just end and they could come back with the information. Fives wasn't too sure he wanted to do this. Truthfully, he understood the sentiment, but he needed to get to his brothers. They were dying for nothing, and it had to be stopped. Asajj understood that, but she used an example from her own experiences. When she wanted revenge on Dooku, she and a few of her sisters went and attacked him. Following that attack, Dooku returned to exact revenge, and now all of her sisters and her clan were dead. If Fives was dedicated to saving his brothers, then he needed to be patient with this. If they dropped this bombshell, it could force the Republic to act really negatively to the clones. Fives was very confused, and he didn't understand how they could just let them continue to suffer, but it was what they had to do. Despite Palpatine being the one with full control over the clone army, they might have to bite the bullet because the public already was focused on the clones. Fives sighed. It made sense. If a clone accused of being mentally unstable and a former Separatist loyalist came out with information on the Republic and what was behind it, the clones could face the brunt of the result. Or, of course, they could just refuse to believe it, which would destroy the Republic itself. Her hopes were rooted in the idea that things could calm down and they could find someone to relay this information to. Fives had already told her everything she needed to know, so if he died, she could bring the information to someone who actually cared. Hopefully. Their hopes for the end to the chaos on the top side of the planet didn't come. The clones went for a full week dealing with assaults from protesters. These people were throwing stuff at the clones, calling them an assortment of horrid things, and telling them that they weren't wanted anymore. There were calls within the Senate for a change of military. Obviously, it couldn't be done so late into the war, but the Republic did have a militia that could be stretched out to hold off the front lines if need be. It was a terrible situation, and Palpatine was trying to maintain faith in the clone army that he desperately needed to win this war and of course become emperor. In the city streets outside of each important landmark, the protests got more heated. The clones started to get frustrated. Sure, the Jedi were backing them, but the fact that their government turned on them made them see how corrupt the system they were fighting for was. Initially, it started out with these protesters getting a little feisty, and then the clones got hit with random objects, and then a clone trooper fell. No one really knew what happened after that, but outside the Senate building, as the senators pushed for a militia to take control over the clone army, there was a firing squad of clones outside the building killing protesters. For the senators, most of them didn't want to lose control over the clones, but there were Separatist aligned senators and representatives that worked out of alignment with the rest of the Republic. The fact that senators of the Republic didn't notice this was jarring enough as it was. Regardless, these corporate representatives motioned for the removal of the clone army. There were senators that blindly followed it, but for the clones, with no understanding or comprehension of their government, they didn't fully understand that this wasn't an agreement with the protesters. But it didn't matter now. There was a show of disunion between the government and its army. What made matters worse was the massacre that followed the protest. People ran away in droves as clones opened fire, while they also tried reining in their loose cannons. This only happened at the Senate building, despite other protests taking place at other buildings across the city. There were screens behind the clones at the Senate building, so they could hear the representatives of the Trade Federation and Commerce Guild telling the Republic to drop the clone army. Then a senator from a mid-rim world chimed in, because they didn't face any battles. Why would they need clones? It was a horror show, and Palpatine was discreetly taken to his hidden bunker to be kept safe. He was okay with all of this transpiring, truthfully. He would use it to gain more emergency powers, essentially making him irreplaceable. The Republic was in chaos, and so Palpatine naturally would make examples of the few clones who reacted, but the rest of the army wouldn't have any emotions to this. Palpatine requested a list of executive orders from Nala Se while he was in his bunker with his royal guard. There were Jedi on the premises, but they were making sure the senators were taken care of as the Senate Guard locked down the facility, so the Jedi weren't near him. Palpatine, in an effort to make sure no clone would resist him, decided to enhance their inhibitor chips. There were specific codes and executive orders that would basically factory reset the clones. They wouldn't lose their personality per se, but they would lose their uniqueness. They would start to blend in with each other and become almost like a hive mind. This executive order was created in case the clones gained too much personality or something like this happened. It was done because Palpatine predicted that the Jedi would be too loose with the clones. He was inevitably correct, but he quickly and discreetly sent out this order, using his personal scouts to relay these orders to clones when the Jedi weren't working with them or looking. And slowly but surely, the clone army became dormant. The soldiers were soldiering, and they were still operating as sentience did, but there was nothing of substance going on inside their heads. It was truly horrific, but with control over the inhibitor chips and the executive powers he desired, could he really complain? Down below in the underbelly, where the members of the 501st were, they came into contact with Asajj and Fives, as they were preparing to avoid the drama of the battle unfolding on the top side. There was a short skirmish between 501st troopers and Fives and Asajj. They both used stun rounds while the 501st tried to kill them, even Rex. It was so disheartening to Fives, but they were able to escape, thanks to Asajj using the Force. She felt sorry for Fives, but she could understand how it felt. There was also something more though. Fives mentioned how the clones didn't act like themselves before they escaped. He feared that something happened topside, and thanks to Asajj grabbing the wrist communications off of one of the clones, she was able to record every transmission that came through in the previous several hours. With this device, they can unlock all the secrets of the change within the clone army. It was a gut reaction from Ventress, but she was very glad that she did it. In addition to Ventress and Fives escaping, they now had another foe to worry about. Due to the inhibitor chips tightening the clones up and making them a little more subservient, Palpatine was immediately alerted by Captain Rex that the clone criminal escaped, not even calling him Fives. The Dark Lord informed Dooku that if he didn't kill off his silly little assassin, then he would find his head on a silver platter instead of a Nexu enclosure at the Republic Zoo. This was something that could not be messed up. Dooku immediately got to work by doing exactly what he did with Padme. He tasked someone else to handle the mission, who then tasked someone else to handle the mission. General Grievous sent out groupings of commando droids to find and kill this assassin. He wasn't going to skip out on the mission, but why track someone down himself when he could just wait it out and someone else could do it for him? As the Republic devolved into regulations around the clones, such as an inverse martial law and removing their freedoms, Fives and Asajj moved out into the Outer Rim. The Republic and public wanted immediate change after the Senate Building massacre, so what they got was the clones couldn't be out after dark, and they weren't permitted freedoms off of their bases. They were locked in and had to go and follow a regiment schedule. In this way, Palpatine covered his tracks. He knew the Jedi would notice the clones acting complacent, so he made an effort to make it look like they were depressed for losing their right to exist. The following few months would be very quiet for Asajj and Fives. They tried to get into contact with someone. There were allies that they both had, but nothing ever got them anywhere. The Jedi were trying too hard to focus on the war at hand, and the clones were slowly working through their personal issues. The clones were coming back from their jury states of mind, but it wasn't like they were doing it all at once, more so one by one. For Anakin, it was troublesome having Rex lose his personality, and he did consider the ideas that Fives was speaking about. While he didn't agree to the sentiment, especially about Palpatine, he was semi-aware that Palpatine gained more power from the Fives incident, so maybe it wasn't all that far-fetched. Fives and Asajj, on the other hand, were visited by unwelcome guests. Commando droids found the location and they fended them off. In the time since leaving Coruscant, Asajj found herself a kyber crystal and constructed a new lightsaber. The blade had a yellow tint, but they needed to go. This was their best defense in case something or someone came, and as they prepared to leave after fending off commando droids, General Grievous' fleet arrived. He only came down with some Magna Guards and himself. The guards that escorted the droid general quickly moved around Asajj and apprehended the clone by snapping his wrists. He could hardly move his hands as Ventress sized up Grievous. They had fought before on Dathomir, and she had been waiting for this moment. She waited patiently as Grievous moved in. She remembered watching him and Dooku train when she was still an assassin. His weaknesses were his lack of patience, his inability to see the power of an individual, and trust his instincts. Dooku trained him well, but he wasn't prepared for this fight. Their blades crossed paths as Ventress ducked out of the way, using her acrobatic skills to her advantage, slipping away from the vicious strikes. Her blades met with the droid general's in a lock, and then he pulled for his other two lightsabers, which she was waiting for, kicking him right in the lung plate before swiping under and slashing his hands off, while grabbing another lightsaber and igniting it. A blue glow grew across her face as Grievous launched himself at her. He was filled with rage and she blocked with both of her lightsabers. She moved backwards with perfection, her steps mimicking all of her Jedi and Sith training. Asajj moved back towards the tree and used it to dismount behind Grievous, who swung down on her, destroying the blue blade. She used the Force to ignite Grievous' last lightsaber and defend herself with a green weapon this time. Asajj leapt back and kicked his mask, which jolted his mask backwards. He swung down heavier, and the blades caught against hers, as she swung herself around and drove herself backwards, thrusting the two blades into his stomach, before stepping back. He called out to his guards, who charged after Asajj. She had to pick here. If she turned to face them, she'd be weak from the back, and Grievous could get her. But Fives, despite not being able to feel anything in his hands, used all of his strength and pushed through the pain to pull two blasters and fire them into the back of the Magna Guard's heads. Asajj was able to focus on the droid general and kill him. She moved back over to Fives and asked if he was alright. He nodded as they moved back to their ship and they abandoned the system. Grievous' death may have been a setback, but it seriously had been months since everything unfolded on Coruscant. Asajj then told Fives that they needed to do this now, or they'd lose out on saving his brothers. She was sorry for making them wait for so long, but she was hopeful that things would get better. They hadn't. Fives was accepting of this apology, but he didn't blame her for it. The thing is, they were starting to see that the Rex that they saw on Coruscant when they were last there was not the Rex they knew. There were a few encounters they each had with clones, and while Asajj wasn't exactly the first person to care about their well-being, she could tell that they weren't acting the same. It led to their understanding what was said to the clones in the order they deciphered from the communication device when they left Coruscant. It was clear something was done, and with irrefutable evidence, they needed to inform someone. While it sounded like a good plan, despite Grievous dying to Ventress, something happened. The war was coming to a close, whether they liked it or not. Due to the extensive planning made by the Sith to counter everything, the Jedi were spread out faster, and the war was brought to Coruscant faster. It just happened to come in the following hours after Grievous's death. Dooku and Grievous were meant to come to Coruscant in two separate fleets, in an effort to confuse the Jedi. Instead, Dooku had to go to Coruscant and capture the Chancellor. This, of course, resulted in Dooku's death at the hands of Skywalker. Asajj and Fives spoke about the events on Coruscant, and she could see that the war was coming to an end. So they went to the planet following the Republic victory over their capital. But there was something else. The Sith Lord, with Dooku's death, was the last of his kind. Sure, Maul was encountering Ahsoka on Mandalore, which neither of them were aware of, but at this moment, to win this all, there was Sidious. Asajj knew the Jedi wouldn't trust them, especially not this late into the game. She told Fives that she finally understood what the clones were. After months on the run with him, she could see that they were so much more. She was sorry about killing those that she did kill, and she wished she could have never fallen down the dark path. But to Asajj, this moment, right here, was the one where she could make amends with her past. The clones would come back, and Fives had all the evidence to go to the Jedi. But she had to ensure that Palpatine could not execute another executive order to change the psychology of the clone army. If he did, they would lose everything. Fives agreed, but this was a bad idea. She shook her head. She cupped his face with one hand and told him that there were a lot of traumas she had yet to get past, and she wouldn't forgive herself for what she did to the clones. But this was her chance to make Palpatine atone for what he did to her people and his. And in the process, it would give Fives the chance to save his own. It was a fair trade. She kissed his cheek and thanked him for helping her find her purpose. She told him to go to the temple. What would follow would only be chaos. At this point, it was only hours until the execution of Order 66. Palpatine hadn't yet told Skywalker that he was a Sith Lord, but it was on his to-do list. As she made her way to the executive building and eventually through it, Asajj thought about all of her trauma because of Sidious. She was forced to use the darkness, to lose connection to herself. Her Night Sisters were brutally murdered by the Sith. She had been hoping for revenge, and now she could have her revenge with purpose. She could give a good friend, soldier, and person something she could never have back. The Jedi would be apprehensive, but they needed to be the better entity in this scenario. Asajj snuck into the vents inside of Palpatine's office and laid her trap. When Palpatine walked in, he was electrocuted in the middle of his own room. She dropped down from the ceiling and ignited her weapons, and prepared to strike him down. But despite the electricity immobilizing him, he used the Force to stop her and then lift her off the ground. Palpatine pushed through the pain as he stepped forward and out from the electrical trap that was gripping his body with pain. He looked at her with a grin, telling her that she was foolish for coming back. She tried to throw a lightsaber into him, but it didn't work. It fell at his feet and she continued choking in the air. He told her it was such a pity, all of her hard work to survive only for her own motive for revenge to be her comeuppance. Asajj used her full power to try and break free. Windows in the office shattered. The wall and the ground began to crack as furniture around Palpatine broke into pieces. He told her to use that aggressive nature. Despite Asajj being as powerful as she couldn't escape Palpatine's grip of the dark side. He mocked her some more, and then she grinned. He asked her what was so joyful. In her hand, she revealed a trigger. Palpatine's eyes shot open with shock as an explosion radiated across the Chancellor's office. When the smoke cleared, Anakin, who was coming over to inform Palpatine about Obi-Wan's assault at Serena beginning, saw Palpatine walk from the rubble. Anakin was horrified by what he saw. Palpatine's body was disjointed, and he straightened his robes, trying to look semi-presentable. His eyes slowly moved over to Anakin, and then his body slumped over, killed by the explosion. Asajj's sacrifice would be the nail in the coffin for the Sith. Maul would be captured in the hours following Palpatine's death, and Fives would have a chance to tell the Jedi everything. But it was too late. Ventress had died. The information Fives had would be crucial, and they would now see that he was wrongfully labeled. Everything he revealed would save his brothers from their excruciating time as inhibitor-locked drones. With the inhibitor chip removal, the clones became lifelike. They no longer wandered around aimlessly without personality. As Asajj predicted, he had saved his people. Fives would immediately have a chance to gain his rank back, and he accepted it, but on the condition that he could be a part of the investigation on the bombing. The Jedi knew who was responsible, but they didn't want to paint Ventress as a villain, especially after what she did for Fives. Due to Fives' involvement, he'd bring her to her home world and lay her to rest in the waters of Mother Talzin's cave. She was very disfigured, much like Palpatine, but he wanted her to have her peace. While Fives wouldn't see it, tendrils of green mist would arise after she was laid to rest with her sisters. What Fives did hear were the whispers of the fallen clan. All he hoped for was that she could find her peace. The Republic would be unnerved by the revelations of the inhibitor chip program, and the sole blame falling on the Palpatine and Dooku, due to the executive order played through the comlink with Palpatine's voice. These revelations drove a divide into the Republic, causing a Republic civil war. It was clones and Jedi versus militia. The Order tried to mediate, but it didn't work, again. But the result was very necessary. The Republic became the New Republic, and the Jedi Order had to look into some true course correcting for themselves. The Separatists were divided up as the New Republic came in and redid everything they could. The whole Constitution was rewritten by Padme in the delegation of 2000, as they tried to never go into war again. At the same time, the Republic would take care of the clones after bankrupting the Kaminoans to pay for their care. A true comeuppance for individuals ready to sacrifice these living beings for an evil plan. The clones were able to get what they deserved, which was a true and happy life, after of course winning 2 wars in a row. The New Republic would become the government that would establish generational change in a rebuilding galaxy. And that, my friends, is our story. And special thanks to our patrons: Benjamin Wells, Ozpin, Angel Dust, Alexandra Reese, The Beginning and End, Django Fett Clone, Nick5098, INTJ Recluse, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galavic Gaming, Tristan Mandalore, SirBlame1767, Darth Revan, Granity Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewa670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tam, Johnny DeGuin, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Galaxy66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, Fortis Legacy Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, The Man with 3 First Names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button. Support me always. Check out this channel right here if you like me and you like movies. I do both right there. Otherwise, let's talk about this story. So we've had Fives get saved in this scenario a couple times already. We've done it with Ahsoka and what if Fox just didn't kill him. And I think this one is probably the most unique out of them, aside from maybe the Ahsoka one. I thought having a team up of Asajj, Ventress, and Fives would be really cool, but I also like the idea of the information of a clone killing another clone, especially a clone commander, getting linked to the public and affecting the public would be really interesting. I really like the idea of Ventress kind of having this moment with Fives, because they're on the run for months instead of like a couple of days with Ahsoka. They're on the run for months, really getting to know each other. And I think for Asajj, it'd be really good for her to see the clones as something more than just cannon fodder. And as for the Republic, I really thought that there could be a really cool tension there where the tension builds so much to a head where they just vilify the clones just because they want the war to end. And it's kind of that they want the war to end so badly that they just start vilifying everyone. First the Jedi, then the clones, and then possibly after that the Senate, for example. So I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.